And welcome to this EASA workshop on disability, neurodivergence, and accessibility, organized around the theme of embodied knowledge creation. My name is Panas Karabas, and I'm very pleased to have you here today. The aim of this session is to create a space for thinking about how knowledge is made through bodies, senses, access needs, vulnerability, creativity, and different ways of participating in academic and ethnographic work. This is not meant to be a formal lecture-style event. We hope to keep the tone open and reflective and to allow space for different forms of engagement. So please feel free to use the chat for questions or comments, and also feel free to keep your camera on or off as you prefer. By the way, the session will be recorded with the agreement of the speakers. If you have any concerns about appearing in the recording, you may wish to keep your camera off and use the chat selectively. So we're very fortunate to have today with us Petra Kuppers and Julia Sauma. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrong again. And instead of telling more about them, probably it's better for them to present the work and themselves. And I'll now hand over to Julia. And after both presentations, we'll have open the floor for discussions. So, Julia?
Hello. Hello everyone. I think it's afternoon there. There's already a question in the chat. I'm asking if we would prefer cameras on or off. I don't know if that was no, but anyway, I'm okay with my camera on. My name is Julia Sauma. I'm a female presenting person with dark hair pulled up in a bun, and I'm wearing some kind of red reading glasses, and I'm a hard of hearing person. And I want to start off thanking Panas for the invitation to be here today. And also for Petra for our conversations and for her your attention today. As Panas said, this is when we met to talk about doing this session, we thought about this as a kind of quite informal seminar, and I kind of suggested that I would prepare something which is a bit of a work in progress. Is something that I'm writing at the moment, but which is not finished at all. So I'm really, really happy to be able to receive your comments and suggestions. And I had been hoping as well to prepare some drawings, which I've been doing more and more recently and using more and more drawings with my writing recently, as I find the drawings to be really useful to transmit some of the ideas in my writing. But unfortunately, because of ongoing events at Goldsmiths, which is Goldsmiths University of London, which is where I'm based, and also due to personal circumstances, I wasn't able to finish my drawings on time. So I will include that in a future version. So I'm just going to read what I've written so far. It's quite rough at the moment in my mind. And yeah, look forward to comments and suggestions. And if you if you think of something while I'm speaking as well, I won't be able to necessarily stop and answer straight away, but you can also just put questions in the chat that I can turn to later on. Panas, I don't know, are we just going one after the other and then having comments at the end? I can't remember what we agreed, but
Yes, and this is
yeah,
also what Petra prefers.
okay,
So
cool.
let's go for like
Great.
this.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to start off reading. And the title I gave to my presentation today is Quietening, on methods for capturing the unspoken. And the title of my first section is The Problem with Words. I was raised in a family where spoken words reign in the form of stories, arguments, and jokes, primarily at the dinner table. I would say that from an early age, I was always quieter, more inclined to listen. When I spoke, I became muddled or angry, usually both. I felt the limits of my words very tangibly. As I grew up, however, instead of avoiding words, I deepened my relationship with them. I did not want to hide away from them. So I chose to study anthropology and then chose an approach to anthropological research that privileged words, which trained me to pay attention to what people did, of course, but above all, to listen to them talking about what they did and how those words formed concepts and theories about the world. I then found myself working with Quilombola families and activists on the Erepekuru River in the state of Pará in the Brazilian Amazon, trying to listen and feeling like I was failing because I could not hear what people said. My hearing started declining from the age of 24. 5 years later, while living on the Erepekuru, the process seemed to accelerate, but I did not want to leave. I had fought so hard to be there, and there was no one to support me to think about this problem in my home department. I am Brazilian, and Portuguese is my first language, just as those of the Quilombolas I was living with. But I tried to console myself with the idea that, just like anthropologists who do fieldwork in languages different from their own, little by little, through repetition, persistence, comparison, I'd be able to fill many of the gaps in my understanding and achieve a certain fluency in my interlocutor's language. That strategy worked to a point, following the logic absorbed from my family and also my anthropological training that every problem brought important information. With hindsight, however, after the PhD, already using hearing aids that never really suffice, I began to realize that the search for what is spoken and therefore for words and concepts as a way to organize other types of information about the world did not allow me to attend to the information my progressive deafness brought, because trying to hear with hearing loss demanded so much multisensory effort. If problems bring important information, I thought, how not to think of my deafness as part of my methodology? What could emerge if I did? And why continue trying to use a hearing research method? I knew why, of course. Spoken words captured, written, conceptualized, and published are the currency of anthropological and academic knowledge, developed for and within university expectations regarding knowledge production in the form of written texts that can be quantified. To continue doing research and remain in the university, it would be very difficult to entirely reject such academic parameters. To get a job as a lecturer and then keep it in the UK, where I am based now, I am evaluated by the quantity of words I can write and publish. In fact, this is something that is quantified further in the redundancy process that we faced 2 years ago and that we will probably face again at Goldsmiths in the next year, in the form of individual assessment forms that we have to complete to compete for our own jobs. Bringing my deafness to the center of my methodology meant transforming my anthropological approach and also my approach to the university. And for that, I sought other disciplines, especially the work of disability activists and scholars. Through these readings, I understood that it would be possible to develop a methodological approach that would allow me to use my deafness as a research tool and combine it with other tools, including the collection and the writing of words. In recent years, this effort has involved combining writing, speech, drawing, performance, sign language, and various hearing devices, which both amplify and happily also dampen the sounds around me, broadening the tools I can use to pay attention. Whether or not this will mean I am able to remain in the university, I don't know, but I guess we'll see very soon. I was writing about all this for a book on anthropology and disability in a chapter on methodology when Panas invited me to speak here. So in what follows, I try to steer this reflection toward an approach that centers quietness and deafness as tools for paying attention, and therefore tools for research as a relational methodology. I reflect, among other things, on how the body pays attention and on the way my hearing loss was received by my friends and interlocutors on the Eripikuru, which helps me think about what is spoken in view of what is left unsaid. And the title of my second section is Bodies That Know. I was sitting in Isanor and Francisco's kitchen, a couple in their 60s who lived on the Kumina River, an affluent of the Eripekuru. It was just after lunch, and we had been talking about Shikumelu, Isanor's cousin, who had been a powerful sakaka and who had died a decade before. Francisca, or Shika, spoke very quietly. I often had to sit close to her for us to chat, and she would always repeat what she said clearly when I misunderstood something. Suddenly, Isanor stood up and leaned out of the window at the side of the house, which looked over the river. Like me, he was losing his hearing, and Shika would support our conversations, repeating words that the other hadn't heard or had misunderstood. Still, there was a reverberation that Isanor was attuned to on the river and in the forest that I wasn't. He said, "Someone is coming," and went to see who it was. "A habeta," he said, which is a motorized canoe, and continued, "Looks like Maria and Samuel." And he crossed over to the other side of the room, to the door, and waited for them to walk up from the port. I looked out of another window and saw Samuel driving the habeta at the back of the canoe, and Maria, his wife, sitting in the middle with a small blue towel on her head, protecting against the sun. A short while later, they appeared in the doorway. Come in, Isanor said, and Samuel helped Maria climb the steep steps to the house floor, which was built high because of the river's rise and fall. Maria was always very talkative and cheerful. Whenever I passed her house in the Jawari community, where I often stayed, she would call out loudly because she knew I did not hear well. "Woo, Julia, woo!" She would appear at the door or window and ask, "Are you going to Nils's house, Julia? Wait a minute and I'll come with you." Or, "Hey, Julia, want a little coffee?" Or something similar. And we would sit to talk. But not today. Maria was visibly in pain as she walked into Isanor's kitchen and sat on a bench. Samuel followed her in and started explaining quietly. See, what happened is that she was carrying a very big basin full of clean clothes from the river, and she slipped and fell. And I think she has dislocated something. She's in a lot of pain. Maria started talking, her voice cracking. I was waiting for Samuel to help me carry the basin, but no one came. I had told him to put a plank of wood near the port because the river is going down and it's muddy. The basin was too heavy, and I tried to keep it up when I slipped. I think something is out of place, and she pointed to her left side of her torso and touched it gently. No more needed to be said. In silence, Samuel sat down on a bench against one of the walls. Shika placed a chair in the middle of the kitchen and helped Maria walk over. I sat on another bench in front of her, and then Shika sat next to me on a chair. Isanor went into one of the side corridors of the house, where he kept some supplies, and picked up a tub of andiroba gel, a powerful anti-inflammatory, from a shelf. I began to pay close attention to his hands. Isanor dipped the index finger of his right hand into the tub and asked Maria to stand up. With his left hand, he gently raised her t-shirt so that he could see her ribs, and then he gently dabbed some of the pungent ointment onto the area. He closed the tub, put it to the side, and sat down so that he was level with Maria's torso, then turned his right hand so that his fingers were almost parallel to her ribs, with his thumb pointing up at a slight angle. I could see that his fingers and his thumb curved backwards like this, like my fingers. And he slowly and gently pulled his thumb along Maria's ribs, searching, checking, pushing slightly. While facing Maria, he held her left shoulder with his left hand and went through the same slow motion 2 more times. Maria was clearly in a lot of pain. She could hardly take it. Isanor then stepped back and, while cleaning his hand on a towel, said, "It's not desmentido, Maria. It's not dislocated. That's a fracture. And I think you might need to go into town to have that looked at." I offered Maria some painkillers I had in my bag, gave her enough for a couple of days. Her and someone else spoke about when they might go to town, and then after a bit more of a chat, and after Maria had drunk some water, they went home. That evening, after dinner, I asked Isanor about his work as a concertador, a fixer. Like other healers on the Erepekuru, he told me how it was a gift that he was born with, dom de Deus, a gift from God. I asked him about his hands, whether his hands were part of that gift. I told him how I had noticed that he had curved fingers like my own, and he said, yes, to be able to fix bones, you have to have the hands for it. He offered me his hands. He showed them to me like this, and I held them in my own. His hands that hunt and fish and move cattle, and also delicately fix bones. And then he asked to see my hands, and he held them and inspected them. Your hands are very soft, but they're big. Maybe you have the gift too. The title of the third section is Quietening in Research. On the Erepekuru, my hosts, interlocutors, and friends talk softly. There is no reason to talk loudly, and the forest and river around them require hushed tones. A recurrent comment made while children are being told off for splashing around too loudly by the riverbank is, the mother of the river doesn't like people to make loud noises. If you do, you can become sick. The Erepekuru is full of beasts and spirits that demand quietness and that therefore demand different forms of communication, a different kind of attentiveness. The pega, the catcher's boat, is going to get you, was another similar comment made on these occasions. These were warnings that echoed a long history of persecution from the outside, from which the forest and the river protected communities, and for which quietness was and is key. Of course, people are not always quiet, far from it. As I've already described, Isanor and Maria, among others, love to tell stories, and almost every afternoon after lunch, you hear loud music, shouts on the football pitch, endless loud domino matches accompanied by equally loud laughter. And despite warnings, children jump and shout at the riverbanks on most days. However, quietness has an important place there that everyone respects. Alongside the need to animar, or enliven communities, aquietar, to quieten or quietening, is an important activity to sustain good relations with the river and the forest, and for people's well-being. Recalling the image, for me, of balance, described by Quilombola activist and scholar António Bispo dos Santos in what he calls a rural philosophy, and I quote, "When we load a donkey with a basket on one side and another basket on the other, if the load begins to lean to one side, we take a weight from one side and put it on the other to balance." One way we can think about quietening on the Erepekuru, therefore, is as a tool that helps to generate balance and calm in the landscape and in people. Taking this in as an important tool, as a research tool, the quietening appears as something else, something that I am able to activate when I use my hearing loss methodologically. And in this section, this leads me to reflect on what is spoken in view of what is left unsaid in my research. I begin by pointing to how hands and other body parts contain and circulate knowledge, highlighting how quietness is tactile, as described by Tina Campt, and I quote, "Like the vibrato of a buzzing felt more in the throat than in the ear, and uncovering forms of knowing that exist alongside words." In this sense, my aim is not to supplant words because, and also following Bispo dos Santos, I'm not speaking of producing some kind of fragmented kind of knowledge, but rather of knowledge composed by different types of knowing. As described, Isanor was also losing his hearing when the visit from Maria and Samuel took place. Isanor often couldn't hear what I said, and Chico would repeat my words to him, and vice versa. From our conversations during my first months on Erepekuru, it seemed to me that he had hearing loss of a similar level to mine at that time. And then I saw him sense that someone was coming. Soon after I arrived on Erepekuru in 2009, one of the ways in which my hearing loss became more evident to me was the fact that I could never hear boats moving along the river. This is an important skill in riverine Quilombo communities, and I was always struck by my host's ability not only to know that a boat was approaching, but to know the type of engine and who the owner was, even before seeing the boat, just by the sound that it made. People would say things like, "It's the boat from Vahivento community," or "It's Ubus Bajara," or "It's the association speedboat," and so on, when I couldn't hear anything at all. Due to his own hearing loss, Isanor couldn't identify who was coming before seeing the boat, but as described, he perceived a change in the river and the forest that told him someone was approaching. In that moment, I was too worried about what I could and could not hear to ask what he had felt in that moment. But after a bit more time living on Erepekuru, I began to carry out my own experiments with the vibrations of quietness and my hearing loss. I noticed, for example, that the closer a boat was to the riverbank, the closer to the forest, the more sound waves echoed against the forest walls, which are made of a tangle of trees and vines. And by paying attention, I could feel a vibration that felt like a fast beating in my chest, like that. I understood also that this vibration could be only part of the sensation that led Isanor to stand up and say, "Someone is coming," because he and others on the Erepekuru move along the river, paying careful attention to a multiplicity of sensations and forces that are present in the landscape. These are generated by contemporary and historical events and beings, such as the force of the sadness of a marriage that failed, or a quarrel between siblings, or the spirits that dominate a lake, and the waterfall mother who protects their ancestors. What I point to here, what I'm trying to point to, is how quietening, through my own and EASA deafness, marked my bodily attunement to movements and changes on the river during my research, a body of water to which EASA is intimately connected in ways that I will never have access to. This attunement was crucial for my understanding of how people's bodies carry knowledge and how the rivers and forests communicate with people without words. Feeling this in that moment and in others helped me understand a series of other conversations and events in the Erepekuru, which related to the arrangements between people's bodies, bodies of water, plant bodies, animal bodies, boat engines, and many other visible and invisible things that make up that Quilombo area, and also the notion of a pessoa coletiva, collective person that operates there. If, on the one hand, my interlocutor's naming of invisible forces and spirits mattered for my mapping of the notion of collective person that organized political life for the Quilombola communities in the Erepekuru at that time, it was through my attention to stillness and the vibrations I experienced on the Erepekuru because of my hearing loss that I absorbed these words. This embodied understanding was especially important for my understanding of healing practices, such as the one I've just described, where words were sometimes not present, and at other times when words escaped me because of my hearing loss. Izanor used his hands to diagnose Maria, and with fingers shaped in a particular way that contained knowledge of what seems like a dislocation, a fracture, a tear, he examined her body to discover what caused her pain. Meanwhile, the stillness or quietness around me, which freed me from trying to understand what people were saying, helped me turn my attention to how the shape of Isanor's fingers allowed him to work, and then to ask questions about what I was seeing later. The title of the final section is Crip Refractions. The knowledge that connects people and landscapes that I described above is something documented and discussed by anthropologists in many different contexts. However, the phenomenological and sensorial approaches that underpin many of these discussions sometimes trouble me, particularly when I see a tendency to try to verify indigenous knowledge systems with Euro-American scientific knowledge and or philosophical concepts, but also due to the difficulty of including in these analyses the differences between people's different attunements, different environmental attunements, such as the one between Isanor's attunement to the Erepekuru and my own. Centering hearing loss and stillness in my fieldwork has revealed another approach to me. In this, my engagement with disability activists and disability studies authors have helped me a great deal. For example, when I was writing this reflection, the Maya Mingus's concept of access intimacy came to me. Mingus uses this concept to describe the feeling of recognizing, without saying anything, that someone understands their access needs. And I quote, "The strange comfort your disabled self feels with someone on an access level," which reminds me of exchanges on the Erepekuru with Izanor and Shika, among other experiences. And then later, also as a lecturer, when I've taken part in producing or co-producing spaces where different access needs are perceived and met. The point is that the intimacy described by Mingus necessarily involves attentive methods for noticing people's different environmental attunements or dwelling perspectives, maybe, such as the differences between the needs of deaf people, neurodivergent people, wheelchair users, and people with other disabilities. On the Erepekuru, without needing to say so, Shika and my other interlocutors and hosts recognized and considered my deafness daily in a way that I hadn't experienced before arriving there. It was through this collective care that I finally settled into my hearing loss, into being a hard of hearing person. And after the PhD, through engagement with disability studies authors, that I found the language for the intimacy I experienced there. Bispo dos Santos refers to this kind of knowledge as organic knowledge, which has, in my mind at least, everything to do with Mingus's notion of access intimacy. Knowledge that starts from being rather than having, as he says, that starts from bodily experiences in the world. In this sense, it is important to say that my deafness was addressed so matter-of-factly and yet with care on the Erepekuru, also because disability and chronic illness are everyday experiences there, in communities marked by colonialism and state neglect. Access intimacy therefore occurs in what Gina B. Kim calls a context of infrastructural violence. For Kim, transformation in view of such violence means engaging with the alternative infrastructural work and arrangements that emerge from material experience and which produce counter-histories and collective counter-futures. The organic infrastructural work that my Quilombola interlocutors practice on Erepekuru integrates work that they call ser coletivo, or being collective. There, this also includes relations with invisibles that compose the rivers and forest, which is possible because of an attunement to what perhaps cannot be seen, cannot be heard, but which manifests through movement, quietness, forces, sensations. Bispo dos Santos, writing about a new generation of quilombolas who are the first generation to be studying at university in Brazil, refers to them as a generation that can transform these institutions. According to him, only they and indigenous students can, and I quote, bring new fertilized eggs and change who will be born inside the academy. Brazil still has public universities. We are in a very different situation in the UK, and I'm not sure that universities can be transformed. However, research practice will endure outside the university. And in that respect, I believe that the engagements with organic knowledge that we see in the work of scholars, such as Bispo dos Santos and others, and that some of us carry in our bodies cannot be merely descriptive. It must have consequences for how we work and how we continue to produce knowledge, whether in the university or not. By opening a space for this work in my methodology, I am asking myself and all of you, what kind of research practice do we want and can we contribute to? And within that, how can I approach what is spoken in the view of what is left unsaid? And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Julia. That was amazing how you connected how you started your current practice and also discuss current issues of precarity altogether, because actually it's something that affects us and affects our methodology anyway. So many things to discuss and think, but let's wait for now and see what Petra has to tell us.
All right.
And I'm sure we'll have a great discussion afterwards. Petra, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Julia. That was a beautiful talk. It was lovely to listen to that and be in the slipstream of the care, the infrastructural care that you've created here for us. So I appreciate this. very much. All right, and hello, everybody. I am Petra Kuppers, she, her. I am a white, German, disabled, cis woman. I have white hair, silver pelt hair, and have green glasses. And I'm sitting here in up north Michigan, Anishinaabe territory, Odawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe territory. And behind me are beautiful trees, and to the side is a gorgeous lake. So it's summertime in Michigan, and I hope everybody's cool enough and warm enough at the same time. So wherever you are, I'm reading the European news, and oh my God, the world we live in. So I brought to you my current work. I'm going to talk to you about two of my research projects, and I did create a little PowerPoint, which I think is always a wonderful way for me to bring my research participants, my friends, my colleagues into the room with us. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to throw into the chat the links that I'm going to use. Okay. So those of you who are watching this, if your internet isn't super stable, you might just want to grab these links because the last two are little videos. I'm going to share a few minutes from each of these videos with you. And before that is a link to, my general site where you can get a lot of information about the projects, as well as an open and free access to my most recent book. Open access is a wonderful mechanism of sharing our work in community settings because I can share for free with the wider world out there, which I very much appreciate. I think it's a wonderful activist tool for us to make sure that our work is not shut away from the people that we are. All right, so now I'm going to figure out how to get hold of my PowerPoint. Here we are. Got it. Okay. I assume that you can all see my PowerPoint now. Please let me know if that's not the case. Can you see the picture?
Yes,
I can't.
also okay.
Yes. Thank you so much for affirming that to me. It's like sometimes Zoom does all kinds of weird things, but here we are. So I'm going to give you this talk, Disability, Plant Lives, Community Media, Experiments, Eco-Soma Approaches to Embodied Artistic Research. I think I just threw everything I was currently thinking about into that title. So it might not be the most organized title in the world, but it's very fun. And you see here an image of a bunch of us. This was in New York. This was on a fake lawn outside the Lincoln Center in New York after a embodied workshop where we're working together, and we're just having fun. And I put this picture on because it's summertime and we're smiling and we're happy to be together, which to me is one of the most important parts of doing the kind of research that I do. All right, so who am I? Where do I come from? Origin stories, storytelling, as we just heard in Julia's talk as well. Storytelling is such a powerful way for us to communicate research and communicate knowledge. So my origin stories is I come from Germany. I'm a German person. I come from a perpetrator nation, and I grew up at a time in the 70s and 80s when that was very heavy on my mind. And whatever kind of community workshops I led all over the world, I would always lead with the fact that I am German and give people opportunities to leave, which people did, particularly people who had tattoos on their arms. There was a choice needed to be made. I need to acknowledge who I am in the world, coming from a perpetrator nation. I come from the Niederrhein, the lower Rhine area, which is characterized by the river Nears, the rivers. It's a very riverine country. Julia, just like what you were describing, I'm with the riverines. Land, water, and haze. That's like a core way of being where I come from. So I put this picture in here. This is a wintry picture, but you get the sense of the fog and the haze on the land. The land and water are quite closely related. There's living creatures everywhere. Each one of these little rivers would have a creature living in it. And that's how I grew up, and that's what I know, so it still characterizes the way I approach the world today. We are surrounded by living creatures. We are living creatures in a world that is enlivened. My family's religious framework was strong Catholic ritual. It's old school Catholic ritual. It's Catholic ritual that involves processions. Nothing like, I know you're not from I live in the US right now. I said I'm in Michigan. In Michigan, Catholics are around indeed, and they feel very low key to me. I come from the kind of Catholicism where people just have some giant procession all around the village, right? So that's that kind of scene, very ritual based way of approaching one's embedment in the world. And the processions would go around and bless the land. So I also come from a place where we're blessing the land. Well, I would feel very conflicted about it. I'm a queer woman, Catholic ritual and queer womanhood did not go well together. But we had the altar in our family garage. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of tension with families of origin going on in there. But there's something about that embedment in ritual that has shaped me as a performance artist, performance scholar. And another thing that characterizes my family of origin, my origin story, is that all the divinatory practices were very much part of where I was growing up, like lead pouring. If anybody's here from Germany, I see a lot of names that look as if they might be from my neck of the woods. So people probably are familiar with lead pouring, where you heat up the lead, throw it into a bucket of water, and then you forecast the future from that. So those kinds of practices were very much around, and they completely shape my imagination. And it's very interesting to me now that I work in an Anglo environment. I worked in Britain, in Wales in particular, for 10 years before coming via Aotearoa, New Zealand, eventually to the US. I'm now in an Anglo-dominant environment, and the sense of ritual, divination, spiritual embedment isn't as clearly marked on the academy as I feel it could well be. So my work is very much trying to lean into that, to be part of that, to think about that aliveness of the world in a spiritual sense all around us. So those are my origin stories. And this is my work. This is what I do. This is how I write. So this little slide is what I used when I gave my book tour. So my most recent book is called Eco-Soma, Pain and Joy in Speculative Performance Experiments. Eco-Soma is from 2022, but it's still very much what I do. And it's all about arts-based methods, ways of knowing. So I just thought I'd share this little slide with you. This is my little summary of a whole book. And the book is available for free, as I said, which I love. I think it's wonderful to be able to have open access in the academy. It does open up the boundaries of who we are and who has access to this kind of knowledge in really beautiful ways. At the core of Eco-Soma is what you see right in the title. I'm not trying to coin, get involved in capitalistic coining of words. I'm not interested in creating special terms that the world can then use and attribute to me. So Eco-Soma is clearly eco-somatic, old and much older world. But the reason why I'm using this two-step is because I'm a limping person. I limp, I stumble. Just like Julia, the way you're talking so beautifully about how your embodiment and your sensory being in the world influences how you know, the same is true for me. I'm a limping person. I'm someone who lives with pain. I'm in and out of wheelchairs, scooters, all my life. And so Eco-Soma has this halting, limping, stumbling two-step in it. There's a pause, there's a hesitation. And the way I'm using this to think about research is that things aren't always clear. I'm interested in being in the moment of hesitation, being not forthright. I'm not striding out to conquer a field, whether it's disability studies or performance studies or whatever. I am instead someone who limps onto the scene, sometimes ahead, sometimes slow, like in a different kind of temporal signature, crib time, as we do call that in my world. There's a pause, there's a hesitation, there's a way of knowing in unclarity, which I find very productive in working in the community. I don't need to go out there and tell people this is this. Instead, we're just exploring together. We're in improvisation together. The book is based on a disability culture perspective on being together in difference. It's access-centered, so it tries to think about access as the first mode forward, experimental access. And it's a creative flight of connection that combines bodily, emotional, and imaginative responses. So as you will see as I'm going through this little presentation, I have questions for you. I will ask you things because I'm looking for your responses, and anthropological approaches for me are about, as Julia said, we're listening to one another. We're being in play with one another. We're creating in an open field. and the relational, provisional, pleasure, pain, imagination. Those are terms that are really central to the methods that I've been developing over these last 30 years. Yeah, can we engage in careful lines of touching that do not seek to penetrate or extract? That's what I put down as the last question here. And that's a really important question to me as someone who, the work I'm sharing with you now is slightly different, but my most current work, the work I'm currently working on, which actually, Julia, also involves painting. It's like I was so excited to see some of your paintings. I can't wait to see it eventually when you've got them ready, which is all good. All good. Time is good. But my work right now is I'm looking at data centers out here in Michigan, the building of data centers and AI intelligence. And I use painting as a way of thinking about geology and the layering of the earth. There's something in there for me about thinking about how not to penetrate the earth, how not to extract knowledge from humans, more than humans or the earth, but find other ways of being with. So the picture that I chose here to share this slide is a little plastic mammoth. So in case you're wondering what that's about, you kind of have to read the book to find out what it's about. I do think it's one of my favorite pictures in the book. This was from it's from an anthropology museum in Ontario, Canada, also on Anishinaabe territory. And it's a museum that is beginning to rethink how archaeological knowledges and ethnographic knowledges get reshaped in a 21st century, more indigenous focused way of thinking. So the mammoth for me stands on that limit. If you read the chapter, which is in the coda of eco-soma, I'm going on a dream journey with these anthropology researchers. We're dreaming into the place where this museum was, and we're hanging out with this little mammoth in a time when giant mammals roamed that particular site. So it's a way of knowing through fossil remnants, through materials like plastic, like little plastic creatures, to get to know where we are and what the deep histories of the land are. All right, so that's more like a teaser, right? I didn't tell you really too much here, but I'm going to take you now into two projects. But this is the background to what I do. So if you want to know how I translate all this into academic language and publish it with the University of Minnesota Press and, have that whole thing out there in the world, then you can check out eco-soma. But for now, I'm taking you into actual projects, which is very fun. All right, let's move forward. And I'm going to tell you about the Kripmat archive dances. So that's a project that I've been engaged in for the last 6 years now. And the picture that you see here shows an old video. It's a video from 1973. And in that video, it precedes so many contemporary approaches to HIPAA violations. And I understand that, we all come from different countries. So ethical protocols of how to use material that's created in medical environments. So this video was shot at the Bronx Psychiatric Building. It's like a closed institution in the Bronx in New York City, where a group of mental health system survivors, well, they're in the mental health system in the video, are engaging in a dance movement therapy class. And it's a beautiful video that I loved, and I found it as a jewel, as an archive jewel in a dance research archive at the New York City Library. And I've been using this image of these two hands touching through the artifacts that old video is creating. When you try to recreate it, you see all that kind of rainbow colored work that's going on in this picture. I can see people touching, and I'm trying to touch this through time. So I'm touching with my fellow mad Crip people across time in community settings. So that really is in a nutshell what the Crip Mad archive dances are about. I'm going to not show that. A lot of our Crip Mad archive dances meetings have been outdoors. So here's a beautiful shot of a lot of people at the Dance Studies Association engaging in the Crip Mad archive dances with me. And at the heart of the Crip Mad archive dances is that we are offering gestures to one another, and we enact these gestures together. And these gestures are from our experiences of what it means to be a mad person, a disabled person, encountering incarceration, medical incarceration. So asylum sites, psychiatric hospitals, various kinds of being incarcerated in medical environments. So I'm now going to stop the share and I'm going to get us to our first clip. Okay, just announcing what I'm doing so you can all follow along. Stopping the share. Hi again. And I'm going to the clip. Here we go. And so this is the clip called Quipmat Archive Dances. If you want to run it by yourself, you know your own internet connection best, so you see what works. I'm going to start it at minute 5:43, which is sort of in the middle of things, but I just wanted to give you a little sense of collaborators and how we all work together. Okay. So you should all be seeing the video screen, which I'm now going to make large. There's always lots of stuff in front of things. Wait, stop there. I forgot to put the sound. I'm going to do that again. Share sound. Excellent. Okay, again, please let me know if you're not seeing the screen and hearing the sounds. We danced. In the middle of the pandemic, we danced with a projection of a 1978 video clip of a dance session at the Bronx Psychiatric Center. On that screen, people were moving in a circle dance. In front of that screen, us, community dancers, danced in front of the projection. Many of us with psychiatric experiences ourselves. And we tune with the video. We tune with the score. We tune with our history.
Hi, I'm Chunika Swepilis, and I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I want to thank Petra for inviting me to share a movement. She asked me to come up with a movement that reflected my experience with mania as someone who self-identifies with having a mental health difference with a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. And the first movement that came to mind was when I was wandering outdoors, delusional and manic, wanting to go home, but feeling myself literally walk backwards. So I call this movement manic movement, walking forwards back.
How do we move on the land? How does the soil connect us?
My name is Kim McDaniel, and I identify as being chronically ill. This gesture is both an embodiment of how I wish I could shake the medical model and also my frustration dealing with doctors and the medical industrial complex.
Right. Okay, everybody. I hope you can hear me again. I hope you all heard the video okay. Yay, excellent. All right, let's take a breath around that. Yeah. So oftentimes when I share this video in a live engagement, if I were now with you in a theater, for instance, I might be showing the video. I work with video in the main because both myself and many of my collaborators live with pain. Or with other kinds of conditions that make it very hard for us to be in like a performance situation. So we can't go to rehearsal, performance, and then, share that way. So we're using community media as a way of sharing. So some of these clips are literally handed to me by my collaborators, like Janika sent me the clip. Kim and I visited with one another and we shot that video in my backyard. But that's, to me, a really rich way of dealing with the fact that so many of the people whose stories I want to tell and want to be with and use as the theoretical foundation for my work, we cannot always be together, and we still want to be in art practice together. So we're using community media as a way of doing that. Anyway, if I show this in person, if I were in person with you, I would invite you all now to recreate the movements with me, to do the movements, to walk backwards with Shanika, to shake your fists with Kim. And I want to give you all a minute to just do that. So let's just do the shaking of the fist, which is probably easiest to do for sitting down, which I imagine many of us are doing. So please take just a second. Your cameras are off, no one can see you, but just get into that sense. This is her way of thinking about the medical system and the frustrations that so many of us with disabled people experience. We're all coming from very different medical systems, very different healthcare systems. I'm in the dumpster fire that's the USA, but I know the dumpster fires in many other countries as well. So how we have access, how we express, how we feel about that's something that we can actually embody, and it gives us a different sense, a different embodied sense of knowing than just reading about statistics. All right. I can't see anybody. I hope you're doing it. Okay, I'm going back into the share and continue the presentation. Here we go. Back to this. Okay, should all be on now. So you saw in the video this piece. Okay, someone open the chat. Check. Yes, thank you, Aaron. So you saw this video where you were crawling over this picture in the video. The video, which is 36 minutes long, and which you're welcome to use, by the way, if you want to use it in your classes or wherever, you're very welcome. It's completely open access for everybody to use. This is the basis of that crawling video. It's Václav Nijinsky, who's a dancer, in an asylum in Switzerland, and he has received insulin shocks, which made him catatonic. So he is here lying, his wife is sitting by his side in a deck chair in the forest, in the garden grounds of this asylum in Switzerland. So when I give these presentations, I invite people to tune with the scene. So I invite you now all to tune with this. And what do I mean with that? Tuning, eco-soma tuning. Tuning means that we can focus on the elements of this photo. So look at the grass, the mown grass. Look at the border that you see there. There's also an area of meadow where the plants live much more wildly. We see birch trees and a willow tree. We also see the wood of the deck chairs, the geometry of the chairs. So I'm inviting you now to take a second and just tune with one of the elements there. So as you're sitting, again, I imagine most of us are sitting, I invite you to lean. Maybe lean with the birch, or sway with the grass, or feel the rigidity of that border. Just tune with one element and let your body be part of that tuning. Just very gently. All I'm doing here is leaning literally 3 degrees to the side. So I'm echoing the tree trunks. Yeah. And let's just let our energies flow back into this moment. Early 20th century, asylum garden, trees, plants, often healing sites. Many of us turn to horticultural therapy or forest bathing, but also questions of who maintains this grass, who created this water, who are the workers, the laborers. So oftentimes in asylums, inmates themselves become the free laborers, right? Nice way of putting that, but or maybe there are people that are hired to do this. Who are the workers who set out that nice tablecloth that we see? Let's think about all the different infrastructural elements here. The garden, the laborers. Okay, let's have a last breath into that posture that we have adopted. So even if you just leaned a little bit like me, those 3 degrees, you probably begin to feel that now in your back a little bit, or in your neck. You feel that just a little bit? Some pressure that we're putting on ourselves. Okay, let's release it. Let's go back to our neutral body, our normal resting body, and just feel into ourselves. We activate something when we put energy into postures, particularly if we hold them for a bit. Activating energy lines. Knowledge flows differently. We can be open and more permeable to different sites when we're engaging in this kind of work. So thank you for doing that. And I'm showing you some pictures of doing this with different people in different kinds of departments. So this is a group of dancers tuning with this picture. This is in the US. This is at Western University in Canada. And here in this case, we held the position quite a bit longer, like 5 minutes, which is pretty long. You know, you really feel that in your body when you're doing that. And it does open up different pathways of knowing, different ways of reaching into history. So embodied research methods into the history of our communities, our ways of working. All right. Well, thank you for that. Thanks for engaging this. I just want to sum up this part and then I go into the second bit. So what are we taking away? These are the things I'd love you to think about. Corporeal knowledge, honor and ritual. You know, we honored Kim, Janika, Vaslav Nijinsky in different ways through these little rituals we just engaged in. We know differently. So these pathways that we're opening up. Yeah, and mad dance movements. Of course, it's very important that the people who are presenting and who are throughout this video sharing their own expertise, you know, becoming the specialists that allow us in. I'm the conduit here. I'm the one presenting to you. I'm the director of this project, but really the voices of participants, the voices of the artists who are working here, who identify as disabled and mad, are at the core, at the heart of what this work is about. So I'd love you to take those things away. All right. Now I'm going to my current project. I'm going to just give you a quick glimpse of that. So we still have, we don't have 11:07. When did I start? Maybe I won't go too much into it. Just going to share you a little bit. So this is the current one. I'm using a headset, virtual reality. And the question at the heart of this project is, who is your plant elder? I'm just going to show you some of these pictures. So this is us, again, hanging out in spaces. This is during a queer clothing exchange in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And we're flying. We are touching, feeling into this world of virtual reality plants. You see in the back there the projection of our virtual reality world and a group of people creating a mushroom together. So we are actually hyphae in the soil, reaching up to create a fruiting body. It's a very beautiful practice. We also have toys amongst us. You see the moth, right? A little plushie that's hanging out with us in the middle here. And we're all growing, finding a different relationship to the world that surrounds us. All right, and since we want to make sure we have enough time to talk, I'm just going to give thanks here. I give thanks to you all. I give thanks for Panache for inviting me. Thank you for Julia for co-presenting with me, for all of you to being here and engaging with this presentation. I want to acknowledge interdependence with the many artists that are parts of both of these projects. And you have all the links so you can follow along with them and having a look at how virtual reality might be a way of engaging plant knowledges in different ways. Yeah, and take care. Taking care is, to me, the most important part of this kind of research work, right? We take care for one another. We take care for the world. We take responsibility for being with one another and being in communion. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Petra. I'm really not sure what to say now. Your soothing voice, it's really amazing. You brought us into a different mindset, world, and everything was calm. And then show us these videos, asking us to do some movements. For me, as for example, some unwanted feelings came out, but at the same time, it was refreshing. So it's very contradicting and strong. And then you continue with the next project, but it was a very strong presentation. I don't know what to say. I'm really thank you. And I'll leave the floor to someone who can say something more concrete and that makes sense, because I'm sure that people have questions.
Thank you, Panish. And I just want to say that having contradictory emotions are so central to this, right? It's the stumbling. That's, to me, the eco-soma moment of being in hesitation. That's okay. You know, we don't need to have any one answer. So I welcome that. And I also welcome us all to just take a breath together. You know, these are two presentations that bring up emotions. That's kind of what, right, Julia? I mean, that's the heart of what we do. If this were not emotional, spiritual, challenging, then we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. So maybe everybody take a breath. Lovely.
I just noticed on the chat that someone said that you have another workshop next month. Maybe at the end you can tell us a bit more.
Oh yeah, let me grab the good point. Thank you so much, Erin, who just mentioned that. I appreciate that. I'm going to grab the link for that.
So
while everybody's just chilling.
Is someone ready to ask a question, to comment? Or maybe Julia would like to follow up with something or to say something about Julia's work.
I'm just trying to find out when this workshop
Comment.
But yeah, if anyone has any questions or comments, they're very, very welcome. They're very welcome here today.
Have someone, Anna, if you like also turn on your camera. If you feel not so, keep it off.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I will keep my camera off because we're in a heat wave right now, and I'm just having like wet towels on my head. So I think it's more professional to keep the camera off for this one. But thank you both so much for this really beautiful talk. Made me think a lot about performance and art making. And I think one thing that I would love to ask Julia actually is what it was like to transform such a, I mean, not just a personal experience of growing like hearing loss, but also a very immediate experience and making that part of your research, and whether thinking through that was helpful to also kind of process what was happening, or if you also felt pushed by the academy to immediately like introduce this into your research, which, yeah, as someone trying to write as a disabled student and young academic, I find a bit hard sometimes to write when things are still so fresh, but it can also be helpful. But yeah, how do you navigate sort of this pull to write the things when they're still very, yeah, like very vulnerable? Thank you so much to both of you.
Panos, do you want to do a round of questions and then we answer, or how do you want to do it?
I think we can take it one by one.
Okay. So thank you, Anna, for that question. It's a really important one. So to have a sense of this, I finished my PhD in 2013, at the end of 2013, 2014. So it's been 12 years since I finished my PhD. And in that gap, many things have happened outside of the academy in my life. So it's not just the academy that sort of has meant that it's taken time. I've also, over the last 10 years, been writing about my experience as someone who has a disability within the academy and what's a struggle it has been to sustain myself in the academy in the UK particularly. But then I also felt like I was thinking a lot about the ethnography I wrote, and how even when I was in the field, I was noticing all of these things and I was thinking about all of these things. And I really wanted to transform that into an approach that I can use in my research. And when I finished my PhD, that wasn't encouraged. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, I was trained in a particular approach in anthropology, which is very much about concepts, it's very conceptual, it's about words. And when I came back with this more kind of embodied practice from my research for my PhD, I was like, well, put that to one side. For the recommendation I had was put that to one side because this isn't going to help you write your thesis. And so, I ended up writing a thesis that I wasn't really happy with because I wasn't able to incorporate my own experiences within that. And I think that that's a really tragic thing to happen to our research. And, thinking about that and thinking about what I want to do with that work now, now that I'm supposed to be in a more kind of stable position, but I'm not. But thinking, towards the future, it's something that has become very important for me, is to really bring my experience, my embodied experience, and with my research participants and friends there, to bring that into what I produce and write and talk about in different ways, including with drawings as well. It's not something that I think, there are different avenues that are opening up. I'm here and I'm doing this, whether people want me to do it or not. And I think there's a lot more people who can be supportive of that now. So yeah, it's a kind of slow process. And it's very experimental, and spaces such as these are really crucial for us to be able to navigate all of these things, and being able to be in the same space as someone like Petra, who has a lot more experience, and all of these things is really, really enriching for that to happen.
Panos, you're muted.
Sorry for this. Anna, do you want to follow up? Or otherwise, Jay won't have a question.
Oh, yeah. Julia, thank you for your beautiful presentation. I'm J1. Yeah, I'm now living in Minnesota and I'm studying disability anthropology. I have a question regarding the methodological approach to interpreting indigenous knowledge. I also identify myself as a disabled native islander Jeju from South Korea. But as a disabled native anthropologist trained within, Western academia, I am, inevitably rely on Western philosophical frameworks when interpreting indigenous knowledge and wisdom. So how can we navigate this methodological tension without risking the exclusion of indigenous philosophy or inadvertently slipping into cultural appropriation? Thank you.
I can say something about this, and maybe Petra as well. I think that, one of the most important parts of that tension is really the use of the work that is being produced by Indigenous scholars, such as António Bispo dos Santos, who is a Quilombola scholar. He comes from the communities that I work with, and he's publishing books that are based on his oral accounts that are being transformed into texts as well, but there's also videos of him speaking. He's not the only one. There's so many Indigenous scholars that we can engage with all around the world, particularly within an anthropological field. And I think aside from that, as someone who is not a Quilombola, as someone who is not Indigenous, our descriptions and our texts, our own positionality in relation to that Indigenous scholarship and how, explicitly, engaging with that in our writing is really, really important as well, so that it doesn't become an extractive process. And the limitations of what we can do and engaging with that explicitly as well. So for different people from different backgrounds, that is going to look different, and I think that, my own kind of presentation for today was precisely that. I can talk about my experiments with attuning to the landscape on Yerepekuru, but I'm never going to be able to access what that is exactly like for my interlocutors, and I have to engage with the limitations of that, and the fact that this is something that is present, those gaps, the unknowing is present in our research, and that is important as well.
Yeah, and I'm happy to say something about this as well. I want to amplify that there are indeed many, many Indigenous scholars that have come to engage in written research practices. So you can find people from many different environments, and that has really shifted in the last 20 to 30 years. So if you read material that was written before 2010 and people say there's nobody around, well, that has shifted a hell of a lot. There's been this incredible emphasis in many different environments to really, really begin to think about, well, as a white woman here in this case, what does it mean to just shut the hell up and offer these publication spaces to other people? So that is a very significant push in the field that one cannot access if one doesn't go into very contemporary writing. If you go back and if you try to do the traditional literature review, here's one of these instances where a traditional method, like a traditional literature review, will only get you so far, because then you have a full field of only white people speaking, and with the very occasional other person getting in there. But if you think about the literature review as its own methodological tool, as its own intervention, as its own activism, then you can look at this more recent span of work and see what is in there and what different voices might be within that. You still have to read somewhat into the old literature. You can't just do away with the history of everything that was out there, but you can see it from the perspective of it's more or less one strand of viewing, and we've lost so many other voices. The voices are coming in. So I think it's very important to think about literary reviews in that way. Not to say that we can only do literature reviews that are 5 years old. That's also not quite how it works. But how can we come up with a way that acknowledges that there are politics going on in our fields and that we need to acknowledge those politics? So I think that's a really useful way of doing it. And from my perspective, I do think that embodied knowledge is also something we can begin to cite. So I just showed you a little 5-minute clip from the Crib Mat Archive Dances. At the beginning of the video is a long acknowledgement of the land from an Indigenous artist. Moira Williams starts the video, and there's a long engagement with firestones. Her gesture are the firestones. So it's you can respectfully cite protocol in the work that you do, including land acknowledgement, including being in a respectful relationship to land. So all these practices are out there, and we can think of all elements of academic knowledge production from a liberatory point of view. We can think them all through in a different way and acknowledge that experimentation is the way forward, not just going back 100 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaewon, for your question and also for your replies. By the way, Erin also make an announcement. There'll be a meeting in the EASA conference for disabled ethnographers. So I don't know about that, but if you like to connect, we can connect with each other there. Let's meet each other. And also there is a network also. So check the comments. And Anna?
First of all, thank you so much. Both of your presentations were so rich and thought-provoking and beautiful. I've been very touched by them both. As a fellow limping and stumbling anthropologist, I am extremely happy to see this conversation going on. And I have the impression that we at EASA are very late to jump in on, how we can actually support colleagues with disabilities, be they visible or not. I think Alex, my colleague, also from the executive committee, asked a very important question there. But my question to you both, and it comes from a concern with politics that you just mentioned, Petra. What can EASA do? What would you suggest it would be a good way to approach this and to set up structures that are sustainable, that do not depend on, different execs moving every second year in order to help to support people with disabilities who are among our membership? And thank you again.
Mm-hmm. Julia, shall I ask that one first and then hand it to you? Yeah. So thank you for that question. I love the question. And my first answer would be that most likely disabled scholars, researchers, activists, artists are already finding their ways, right? So the expertise usually rests within us, and we've been fighting against some of these systems for a long time, and we have ways and means of connecting, but that is not necessarily available for young ones coming in, or whatever age they happen to be, people coming in. So in the organizations that I'm part of, affinity groups are really wonderful. Affinity groups are places where people that are open to people who identify around a particular issue. So they're not necessarily open to people who are just interested in the issue or researching the issue, but are just for us. And it feels a little bit exclusionary sometimes, but at the same time, that is a very delicious exclusion to have. So we have those in a number of organizations that I'm part of. But I think in terms of the wider field, so often it's about understanding that there's so many ways of doing things. So my experience here is very old. So when I was doing my master's at my MA at the University of Cologne, I actually was in social anthropology, and I was getting ready to go out to Indonesia and to research how other physically disabled people were dealing with island life. We're dealing with that border of water and land, right? That was my interest. This is what I wanted to do. And everything was set up. But when people found out that I was actually disabled myself, that I had the disability that I was going to research in Indonesia, they cut it. They're like, I can't go. So I never got a degree in, I got other degrees, but I didn't get in that special little area. It was my mein drittes Fach. I don't know, can't read. I don't know what the English word is for that. Anyway, like the area of that. It had to become a minor. It couldn't be a major anymore, to translate it into Anglo language. Because I just couldn't, it was not allowed. You couldn't go. And it's very important. And I hope this doesn't happen anymore. My suspicion is that it might still happen. Yes, exactly right. So it might be really good for people to think about as they're working with their grad students, as they're figuring out what might be possible, might not be possible, to really always interrogate this internalized ableism. You know, if I am someone who's navigating land, water, movement, you know, as a wheelchair user at that time, a manual wheelchair user, I probably would be able to find out a way of doing it in Indonesia as well. It'll be hard. It'll probably be really stressful. Luckily, at that time, I was in my 20s and probably would have been much easier to do that than it is right now. But the struggles for getting that information or making those connections might be part of the information gathering, might be part of the knowledge structures that we are uncovering and that we're creating. So it might be part of the kind of story that Julia so beautifully narrated for us. So those are like two little moments: affinity groups and real strong awareness that how our own internalized ableism, which is really where we're coming from in the academy, how that might affect what we think might be possible in the field.
Petra
Yeah, I
said,
agree with
oh,
that.
sorry.
Absolutely. It is something that still happens. I've, heard so many stories of PhD students with disabilities who had to really fight with their supervisors in order to be able to do their planned research because of that kind of ableism, which is put out there as kind of protective, but actually stops people from doing the work that they know they can do and that they want to do. And it's one of the reasons, to be honest, where that I didn't want to kind of talk about my hearing loss before I went to my field work, because I had this fear that it meant that I wouldn't be able to do my research. And so I had to deal with that by myself out there, because there was no real kind of support basis for that in my department. So I think definitely affinity groups and thinking about how ableism impacts kind of these ideas of protection that we have towards our PhD students. But also, I think that something else that we really need to consider is how, organizations such as EASA and the EASA as well can open spaces where we can think about how our students and how anthropologists are being evaluated as anthropologists, so that they are able to use embodied knowledge production without, without it being discarded as one of the things that I see in the way that, for example, I am evaluated in my department is all about publications. And that is not necessarily how everyone wants to move forward. And until we think about evaluation for incoming staff and also for our PhD students in a different way, and for career progression as well, unless we start thinking about evaluation in a different way, then, I'm afraid that I think ableism will just continue within our departments.
Actually, Julia, this workshop, which I like to make it a series of workshops, started for this reason, to create this space that you mentioned. And not only disabled students and researchers meet these restrictions, but the system have found more polite ways to do it. For example, if you think about risk assessment that nowadays many people have to submit before go to field work. So the university try to protect you and not allow you to go there because it's dangerous for you. So nowadays they can't say you're not allowed to go for this reason because you're disabled, but it's for your safety. And as Petra said, disabled researchers, scholars always find a way to achieve things that may seem impossible. But this resilience that we are proud of, in a way, has normalized the whole thing. It should be like this. Disabled researchers have to have this kind of ritual passing, to pass all the struggle in order to get accepted to an ableist academia or society. I'm not going somewhere to this. So, Alexandra, do you like to continue? You have a comment, question?
Yes, thank you so much for the lovely presentations. I wrote a question in the chat, but I can repeat it. I think I was curious how you are engaging in your work with neurodiversity and neurodivergent people, and with what we can say are more like invisible disabilities. And that with interlocutors who might pass as what we call neurotypical or normal, right? But then what relationship there is between ableism but also neuroableism within academia and within your work, and I'm really curious how you engage with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I can say mine quite quickly and hand it over to Julia. So I've given you the link. So the whole video has plenty of people. Mad people usually are present as neurotypical and or normal, right? In many places, and then they're not. You know, neurodiversity is something that's really complicated how to locate. So the whole video has actually, there's one interesting moment in the CryptMat archive video. And the reason why it's, I think, not shown in some festivals, you know, it's been shown in plenty of festivals, got its awards, all the good stuff, all happened. But if you do watch it, there's a moment halfway through where there's a 7-minute segment where you're engaging with someone who has no spoken language, you know, so you have to really go into crypt time. You go into a very different place of thinking about neurodiversity. And that is a real challenge for neurotypical folks to hang with that, to be with that. You know, it just takes an amount of time that is kind of very unusual to give in a normate environment. So I'm offering that as a way of thinking about, well, we can share our stories as neurodiverse people, as mad people, as pain crips, whatever we identify as, if we are being offered time and space to communicate. So the video is trying to offer that space for people to communicate, not just in conventional spoken language, not just in talking head, here's my story kind of story, but also in other kinds of embodied ways. So if you were to watch that 7-minute segment, but even if I'd shown this in here, some of you would have probably found it quite challenging to be with it. You know, it's not a contemporary normate attention economy. But if you are watching it and thinking about your own responses and how your response to what you might be seeing on the screen is changing over those 7 minutes, it's a really interesting exercise in neurodiverse communication strategies. Yeah, I think this is where, once again, having multiple research methods and multiple communication methods, multimodal methods, as someone is discussing it here on the Strand as well, in relation to deaf issues, where that is really central. So thanks for that lovely question.
Following up to creating new spaces, if you have any ideas how EASA can help into this, just email me and we'll try to create or discuss it further. So we are open to suggestions because everyone has different needs.
Julia might want to answer that question that Alex has answered.
Yes.
Yeah.
Julia?
Hi, sorry, my Wi-Fi is very unstable at the moment, so I was just moving around. I think in terms of working with the main thing I have found is actually in the last 6 years is with teaching students who are neurodiverse, and the kind of importance of opening spaces for those students, and thinking about my teaching methodology, bringing in all of my experience to try and pay attention to my students within the classroom has been a really important part of that. This is something that is still quite difficult within academia generally, not just in the UK, but also I found particularly in Brazil with neurodiversity that there's a lot of still stigma, and there's a lot of still misunderstanding and a lot of ableism around it. I think it's something that we need to address, urgently, and that doing that within our classrooms and within our meetings as staff is really, really important as well, opening the spaces for that. We're still in a process of opening this up in academia. We're not in a situation where everything is settled and done yet, far from it. So yeah, there's still a lot of work to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Ili?
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for today. The presentations were phenomenal, both of them. And I thank everyone for being here today, because being a researcher can be, and a PhD student like myself can be really solitary work. And I didn't know that so many of us existed. And I can feel that there's a wave coming. There's a sort of wave coming into ethnography, and I'm really proud and happy to be part of that. I'm a visually impaired researcher myself, and I am currently prepared to ride the wave to ethnography and use my own perspective as a visually impaired person out in the field and on how we write things. And I was especially moved by Julia's story, because it might have not been the time yet back then, but it is all of those stories are important and they need to be said. And despite all the precarity that we're facing, all of those neoliberal policies, all of those policies on our bodies, I believe that we need to be speaking up and make a space for ourselves in academia. So thank you both so much. It has been really inspiring to me, and I'm sure to many people that are here with us as well. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you so much, Ili.
If you don't have any other questions, maybe I'd like Magdalena to also say something about the thing that wrote on the chat. Otherwise, I can read part of it. Oh.
Hello. I just want to say thank you for both of you, because my position as a hearing researcher is a little bit different than you mentioned the mobile dev projects for deaf anthropologists, which I of course know very well, but the positions is a little bit different. But thanks to your what you've said and you both said, it reflects it's made me start thinking about my positionality and my body as hearing researcher going into the community, being into this community, and this kind of let's say dual positionality, and a lot of information. And what was very, very interesting, what you said, Julia, about the trouble gives you material to think about. So it was inspiring. It was what I wanted to say, because somehow from as a hearing researcher, I struggle with this positionality, because the scholarship is very strong. But I ask myself this question: do I have a right to research this group? Because there's a lot of this kind of narration about empowering, which I fully understand, because I know the situation for many of years. However, I answer to myself that yes, I have a right to doing this research, and I'm looking for the way to doing it the best way, because filming deaf people signing as a deaf scholar is a little bit different than filming deaf people as a hearing scholar, because there's a lot of this kind of implication. So I'm searching for maybe drawing things like that. But I think I start thinking about my positionality, because it was something which is very interesting here, and maybe to focus on my being in that situation and being aware of this kind of, because the discrimination the people are faced with, I'm a part of this chain because of being a hearing, so it's a little bit complicated. So thank you very much, because it remind me that I am embodied person as well, and I should come back to my embodied as well and build on that. It was inspiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment and your approach. And I think sensory anthropology and ethnography, I think, help us a lot in these cases, and also talk about our feelings, what we sense while we're doing field work. But I'll leave that to specialists. So Petra, Julia, do you want to comment on this? No?
Just yay and thank you.
Yeah, just thank you so much. It's been really incredible. And I fully appreciate that it does feel, I think Illy, who said that there's a wave coming and always there, was, I don't know, something that is, I feel very appreciative of being able to participate in these spaces now, even if I didn't have them when I was starting out. So yeah, thank you so much.
So if you don't have any other questions, thank you everyone for being here today. But before we close, Petra, do you want to tell us more about the workshop that you organize? I'm really curious.
Oh, yes, thank you. Of course, I'd be glad to. So I put the link in, and you can also just find it through this one. I think it's the easiest for me to put in here. So yeah, so it's from July 27 to 31st, and it's at noon Eastern time, which means it's about 6 o'clock European Central Time, every day that week for 1 hour. So we're meeting online, and we're having these dream journeys. So very similar to what we did when we were just looking at the Nijinsky photo together as we're tuning in. We're doing this around planting disabled futures. So we're going to be doing a lot of work around material, the spaces that we're in, the materials that we touch. It's an open workshop. I'd love to have you. Here I can put the full description in. Here it is. Isn't it great that we have all these chats? Oh, it doesn't allow me to post the whole thing. I'm just gonna post a little bit of it, and then I post the second half this way. Yeah, so it'd be great to see you, and thank you so much. This was a lovely conversation. I also very much enjoyed the side conversation. In the second half of our time here, I've been like, whoa, like clicking away on all the different stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
So
Yay.
thank you for your amazing presence today. And actually everyone who participated, either commented or not, as Il said, maybe a wave is coming, and it'll be interesting to be part of it. And let's make it happen.
Thank you all.
So
Thank you
have a
for
good,
this lovely conversation. This was I really enjoyed the energy in this room. It's great. And yay, hybrid work, isn't it? Isn't it great we can come together this way? I very much
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yay.
so take care, and definitely have more opportunities to discuss in the future. So have a good evening, morning, afternoon, and bye-bye.
Bye. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
And Panash, when you're posting this, you might want to put the links to the videos into it, because
Yeah.
I realize that people wouldn't, if people just watch the video, they don't have those links. So
Yes.
maybe you don't need to have the whole of the chat, because that might be personal at times, but those full links that I posted, if you just grab them and put them with it, I think that would be helpful to
Already
people.
had in mind.
Excellent. Very cool. Thank you. This was
Thank
a
you.
great way of really reaching lots of different people. That's beautiful. I love that there were so many people who identify themselves. And Julia, that was really lovely. I loved hearing about your work. I can't wait to see the drawings. Can't wait to
I
see
will
them.
send them. I'll send the full thing around when they're ready.
That'd be great.
And yeah,
Yay.
it was
Have a
lovely
lovely
to
summer.
know about your work.
Stay
Thank you.
cool.
Actually,
Right?
Julia, if you like,
Stay
we can
cool out there.
circulate it to
Right.
the people who registered in this workshop.
And you have
Because
a
I'm
winter.
also
You have a
very
lovely
keen
winter,
to
Julia, right? You're
see the drawings. I'm sure also others. So if you like, share them with us. And as I
Yeah.
said, everyone, please contact me for more ideas, suggestions, what like to do in the future, what you find productive, and how to create our own space, not only in EASA, but in academia and in the world. So bye-bye again.
Bye. Speak
And
soon.
definitely be in touch, and see you in Poznan, many of you.
Bye. Bye. Thank you so much.